Good evening and welcome. My name is Alexandra Brown, and I am the Special Projects Coordinator of Alumni Engagement at Rutgers University, Newark. Thank you all for joining us for tonight's Anchors Among Us event, which is part of a year-long celebration of Rutgers University Newark's 75th anniversary. Rutgers Newark dedicates itself to community building and educational excellence. Working to embody the term anchor institution, its mission is to train and support students who will carry on this tradition beyond the walls of the academy. Tonight, you will hear from a few of the university's anchors, alumni whose work and service fortifies a tradition of community building and social justice. We are proud to welcome Bashir Ali, Beatrice Simpkins, Noel Lorraine Williams, and Kareem Willis. This discussion will be moderated by Dr. Lisi Hunter, who is an alumna and instructor of African American and African Studies in the School of Arts and Sciences at Rutgers University, Newark. Dr. Hunter received her PhD from Drew University. Her dissertation focused on the role of African American religious ideologies on racial constructions. She holds a Master of Arts in American History from Rutgers University, Newark, and is currently teaching courses on African American Studies and Afro-American History. She's actively involved in organizations that help urban students transition into college, as well as collaborative programs for at-risk college freshmen. She is also deeply committed to restructuring historical teaching and encouraging greater literacy rates among students of color. Now, before we begin, I'd like to mention that all attendees have been placed on mute for the duration of this discussion. If you have questions, please send them via the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen throughout the presentation. We will get to as many questions as possible. It is now my privilege to turn it over to Dr. Hunter.
Thank you, Alexandra. Welcome to everybody who is here. We're so appreciative that you're spending this time with us. And of course, welcome to our panelists who have very graciously agreed to talk to us about the work that they do, anchoring us in the city of Newark. I'm going to read their bios very quickly, and then we're going to jump right in with questions. And of course, if you go to the main page where this event has been advertised, you can find out more about each of our panelists. So we'll go in order, alphabetical order. Bashir Ali is a father, husband, friend, writer, community activist, entrepreneur, environmental educator, and mentor. A proud Rutgers University Newark alumnus, Bashir is a lifelong student of history and a champion of safe, healthy communities and families. For the last 20 years, Bashir has served the broader Newark community through his activism and mentorship. He and his lovely wife serve their community as counselors and trusted advisors to youth and adults. Bashir is the founder and president of Maun Inc., a social service agency that provides support and resources to many. These services include rental assistance, food vouchers, medical referrals, and financial education and counseling. Maun also hosts the city's only Quranic competitions, which provide youth and community members with scholarships and other prizes. Additionally, Bashir serves as a board member of the Friends of Branford Place Masjid, a historic space of comfort, refuge, and community for Muslim families in Essex County. And in the wake of the pandemic, Bashir has been on the front lines of Newark's ongoing battle to reopen the Branford Masjid. Beatrice Simpkins graduated in 2015 from Rutgers University, Newark. And in 2016, Ms. Simpkins became a Rutgers University 250 Fellow, receiving a medal at our culminating Day of Revolutionary Thinking event, celebrating Rutgers' 250th birthday celebration. She serves as the pro bono executive director of the Newark LGBTQ Community Center and is the chief program officer for the Partnership for the Homeless located in New York City. In 2021, Ms. Simpkins received the Equality Leadership Award from Garden State Equality and the LGBTQ Police Community Partnership Award from the Newark Police Division. Her nonprofit leadership career began when she joined the historic work of the National Urban League through its affiliate, the Urban League of Hudson County. Her commitment to providing supportive and transformative human services focuses on addressing disparities in housing, health and human services, community development, social justice, and LGBTQ+ and gender equality. Beatrice spent years working in programs that address the intersectionality of HIV and AIDS, housing, economics, and social injustice. in New Jersey and North Carolina. She is currently a doctoral student at Saybrook University, seeking a terminal degree in transformative social change. Beatrice is a cisgender African-American lesbian who uses the pronouns she, her, hers. Ms. Simpkins holds a master's degree in public administration from Rutgers School of Public Affairs and Administration and a bachelor's degree in business management from the University of Phoenix. Noel Lorraine Williams lives and works in Newark, New Jersey. She received her bachelor's from the New School for Social Research and her master's from Rutgers University, Newark. As a public humanities specialist, artist, researcher, and curator, her work examines the ways African Americans utilize culture to reimagine liberation in the United States. She has exhibited and lectured in multiple venues, including the Newark Museum, the African American Museum in Philadelphia, and Jersey City's museum. Her work as an artist and curator has been reviewed in the New York Times, Art News, and other publications, including the Star Ledger as a part of their profile on the Newark School, and her exhibition, Black Power, 19th Century Newark's First African American Rebellion. Last year, her exhibition, Radical Women Fighting for Power, and the Vote in New Jersey, was the recipient of the Giles Wright Award for contributions to African American history in New Jersey. She has also recently received the Creative Catalyst Grant from the City of Newark and is a recipient of the 2021 Individual Artist Fellowship Award for Crafts from the New Jersey State Council on the Arts. Kareem Willis is a dynamic scholar, activist, and proud member of the LGBTQ+ community. As a doctoral candidate, currently enrolled in the School of Public Affairs and Administration at Rutgers University, Newark, Kareem learned how to harness his passion for social advocacy, justice, and empowerment for the betterment of the lives of other persons. Through his research, Kareem explores the underlying social equity and social justice issues and concerns within public administration, public management, and nonprofit management, leadership, and philanthropy. As a nonprofit enthusiast, his focus is on researching methods that nonprofit organizations and others charged with fulfilling the public good can deploy to maximize their impact. The essence of his work serves to strengthen disempowered and disenfranchised individuals and communities by providing access to and creating spaces and resources that will help them realize their limitless potential. His work afforded him a nomination for the Them Cloud Kids Ubuntu Awards in the Love is Love category, and was the recipient of the Rutgers University Clement A. Price Human Dignity Award, as well as the Jan Herman Venkier Leadership and Vision Award from Circle of Friends. So welcome again to everyone who is here. Thank you so much to our panelists for the work that you do. And we're just going to jump right in. And I'd like each of you to talk. I know I read quite a bit of the work, about the work that you do and who you are, but if you could each kind of walk through and talk to us about how you came to the community work that you are doing and have done.
Well, I guess I'll go first. So I can kind of blame my origins of community work on my mother. I was adopted into a family of Black folks that had, come up from the South to escape Jim Crow. And so my family members were much older than me. And so, I came up during the civil rights movement. I was a little kid and, my family was very much involved in that. My mother was a human rights commissioner and part of the Citywide Black Association. So as a kid, I was always going to a protest or a community meeting or, serving cake and juice at the community meetings, because that would draw people in, and helping the fried chicken and anything else, through grassroots movements that people were involved in at the time. And so that's really where I got my taste for, being engaged in my community, wanting to give back, seeing things that needed to be fixed or changed and doing that kind of work. And so I started off working at Wall Street after high school. I worked at Merrill Lynch for a few years, and then I started working at the Urban League of Hudson County. And from that point on, my entire focus has been nonprofit work around, addressing issues of housing and medical care and the inequalities in healthcare and education. Urban League historically was an organization, and still is, that promotes equality in employment and the advancement of people of color. And so when I finished my bachelor's degree, I decided that I would enroll at go SPA. And I got my degree in 2015. And, I intentionally did that because I have an interest in public affairs, in the state of public affairs and public policy, how we change it, et cetera, and how do you empower people to participate in their democracy so we can, do some stuff in our communities to make things better. That's my 2 cents.
I actually got my start, I say my intentional start at Rutgers University, because I wasn't always, so I'm an immigrant. I came here from Jamaica, and I was very active in service organizations and so on. But it wasn't until I came here and I understood how my existence, right, at the intersections of different marginalized or minoritized identities and what the implications of that meant, and really becoming empowered to figure out how I could, well, one, recognizing that I wasn't necessarily in the most favorable circumstance. I grew up in Jamaica. It's, we're a majority Black country. I didn't have to think about my Blackness in ways that I had to think about it here. And so understanding the implications of what it means to be Black, queer, immigrant, very flamboyant, gender nonconforming, and how you move through the world and kind of discriminations and things that you will experience and how people like you experience those things really empowered me to kind of get involved. And then when I met, I was introduced to the BA MPA program at the School of Public Affairs and Administration. I started, in fact, I continued at SPA. I think I was the first student to get all 3 degrees at the School of Public Affairs and Administration. And that's how I got my start. I always tell people I'm not from Newark, but Newark has been good to me. And I think I was very fortunate to be able to attend Rutgers University Newark in particular, because I keep telling people I stumbled upon these opportunities. I didn't necessarily go looking for them, but I think the environment I was in was very instrumental in kind of presenting those opportunities for activism, for advocacy, for community engagement, for community service. And so I started working with the LGBTQ Resource Center on campus under the leadership of Marion Greathouse then. And I soon got a job at the Newark LGBTQ Center under the leadership of Reverend Janice Jackson at the time. I was the administrative assistant, and so on. And so like being exposed to these different pockets of communities that very much represented the different identities that I wore allowed me to get one, knowledge about the things and be able to put word and understanding to the experiences I was having and be able to put language to it, and then being able to find opportunities to help in the fight for the betterment of those individuals like myself.
I'm going to save the best for last. I think my activism, actually, as Kareem said, my purposeful and intentional activism began in 1987. That was the year that I was, 1985. It was then that I was active military, and I volunteered to become the aftercare facilitator for active duty members who were experiencing drug addiction. And so they would go to rehab and come back, and I was there to make sure that they were working their programs, facilitating their, at the time they were alcoholics. The addiction was treated with antabuse, which was a pill, a chalk-like substance that they took every day, which if they drank would cause them to vomit. So it was one of the chemical treatments that is like so outdated, and I knew there had to be a better way. But that's what the military used to facilitate addiction treatment. And in '87, when I was honorably discharged, I jumped into the communities in Patterson. I jumped into the Islamic community in Patterson. There was a need there, and I just jumped in. I didn't have a clue, but I just jumped in. I knew that there was something that needed to be done, and that was my foray into activism. And as I've grown and gotten older, I realized that that those are just small segues into a small part of the community at large that needs help. So I became a chaplain in the county jail system. And that put me in contact with another population that was really close to me because, as you mentioned, the new Jim Crow, Michelle Alexander paints very vividly, my generation that experienced that age of mass incarceration. And I ran into, men that I grew up with and was wondering where they were. And I realized that, the county jail system had them and the prison system had them. So, so finding myself in there to be a simple Islamic ombudsman, I found myself being more of a, how can I help them once they're out? And, and it was overwhelming because again, I had no clue. I wasn't trained in this. This was just something I felt that, needed to be done. And so I did it. I had the Islamic training for religious reasons, but I didn't have any social service experience, anything like that. So I just jumped in and said, I'll learn, was just willing to learn. And I learned like 3 really important words in my life that I don't know. And I realized that when I said I don't know to a lot of people, they were willing to help. And it kept a lot of the, it kept a lot of bad out of my way and it opened up for a lot of good. And just so then I became a mentor in the 90s, excuse me, in the late 90s. I became a mentor at a charter school, Discovery Charter School in downtown Newark. I enjoyed it so much. And I knew that that was something that I really wanted to do. I wanted to work with kids. But I knew with the children that there were other things that were probably in the way from getting them to have good environments for learning, that you had to interact with the family. So it wasn't just about mentoring the children, it was mentoring their families. It was being a part of the family. So when Hurricane Sandy hit, and I saw just how ill-equipped many of the institutions, especially the Muslim institutions, were really ill-equipped, just weren't equipped to handle so many, Muslims, and they were left to the, the charity of the churches, which is fine, but that was overwhelming them. So that's when Ma'un came into existence. At my kitchen table with my wife, and I said, we have to do something. And so Ma'un was born then. And our goal was to assist, was to raise $10,000 and then open the doors up and give it away. Well, we raised close to $50,000, $60,000 and gave it all away. And we raised this on it. The whole focus was, I'm not going to ask anybody to do anything that I'm not willing to do. So the money was privately raised, and I realized that people did trust me and families trusted me, so I could be an advocate for them. So I realized that another one of the advocates is when I was on campus at Rutgers, I realized that students were hungry on campus. And I would go into my pocket and I realized that there were other needs that had to be met in order for them to be successful as students. So, you come into all of these realizations and you say, I guess this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And so in my pursuance of a degree, I realized that I'm not here just to learn, I'm here to give. So that's me, that's what you have. And I surround myself with people who are just like me, like-minded, willing to give, will open up the doors and give it all away if it helps. So there you have it, that's simple.
So thank you, everyone. It was good to hear everyone's stories. So I guess I started when I was born in Jersey City. When we moved to Newark, 16th Avenue, 21st Street, like when I was about 11. And my mother, she had been a volunteer since she was very young. And I had been a volunteer for a long time. And when I got to high school, I co-founded a gay straight alliance with other students in the school. I was the president of Women of Color. organizing like conferences. And then once I got to college, I continued as a student organizer, more around teacher, like professors. We were part of this education, not domination at the New School University, to retain Jackie Alexander and to also raise the wages of the security guards who worked at the New School, and other intersectional issues, as well as LGBT issues. And then once I left the New School, I started working at a feminist women's foundation. And I also was a volunteer at the Audre Lorde Project in Brooklyn. So I have a history of activism around Black feminist LGBT issues, equity, and cultural work. And so when I returned to Newark, I actually became more involved in the artist community. Prior to then, I didn't identify as an artist, and it was actually a couple of years before I started identifying as an artist. My work, though, had always been cultural in nature. So I always believed that culture was at the root of activism. Being raised in Jersey City and Newark, the result of the Black arts movement and other movements, culture. I mean, I never understood a division between art production, political ideas, and community. So I think that's intrinsic to African American thought. So, but I did become more deeply involved into my own artistic practice. And so a lot of that practice has been around understanding what it means to be American through the lens of Black women. But I did continue to do volunteer work with Newark Gay Pride, as well as develop my personal practice. And so a couple of years ago, I decided to apply for the Public Humanities program for my master's here at Rutgers, Newark, by the invitation of Professor Mary Rizzo, and who I knew from Newark. And when I entered the program, I was going to really concentrate on illuminating and kind of elevating the role of African American women during the Newark Rebellion. So Black women's activism, as well as the Black women who were murdered, as well as Black women's voices and thoughts about it. I believe in a lot of ways, Newark's history represents the country's history, And so, but then I decided to work on a public humanities project, where I wanted to identify Black Power, what I call Black Power sites in Newark. And I approached the chancellor's office about it, and she said, "Oh, we're meeting." The vice chancellor said, "Oh, we're meeting about Frederick Douglass coming to Newark." And I said, "Oh, well, I'm doing research around the Black community there." So actually, this is a recreation that's behind me that I created. It's one that's a part of a series. It's actually the early part of the series that I decided not to use this, but this is what the church looked like on the now renamed Frederick Douglass Field. So you kind of see the building here in the back, up the hill, and then the church was close, a few feet away from Warren and University Place. So not only did Frederick Douglass visit there, but Henry Highland Garnett, for those who know Black abolitionists, even Henry Drayton, who was a part of VZ's, who was accused of being a part of the accused rebellion by Denmark VC, actually was a pastor and taught at the church. So I really wanted to make a commitment to, I was kind of like drawn into the 19th century. My specialty for an undergraduate had been the 20th century. So for graduate school, I just got drawn into the 19th century because I saw a lot of the ideas about that we associated with the 1960s were actually present in the 1860s, 1840s, 1830s, and that there were a lot of national figures here in Newark. So that's a little bit about where I started and how I got here.
I love it. I love everything about it. So we're going to pivot, well, not quite pivot, but build out a bit and sort of thinking about the work that you all do. And our next kind of question is about building and keeping community. And as each of you have referenced, a lot of the work that you're doing is service, and that entails, being connected to people, being connected to communities. And so if any of you or all of you want to talk about, why has it been important for you to build communities and sustain relationships where you're doing your service work? And also, how do you sustain the relationships that you are building and the communities that you're building and strengthening?
So I know for me, I do it within a professional capacity. So right now I'm the director of the African American History Program here at the state of New Jersey with the Department of State at the New Jersey Historical Commission. So one of our commitments here at the New Jersey Historical Commission is to really empower and illuminate the work of African Americans who are doing the work at these historical sites throughout New Jersey, as well as our multiracial partners and advocates at other institutions that are talking about African American history. So that's one way that I connect to community. Also through my art practice and being involved with artistic organizations. Right now I'm a part of the feminist residency at Project for Empty Space and continue to support organizations in Newark. But I believe it's very important right now as public humanities professionals, historians, scholars, or wherever people who are engaged in the past to really share with the public in dynamic and interesting ways about the long history of Black activism in Newark. So that's that's the investment for me.
And for me, my investment and my connection, maintaining that connection to the city that has adopted me. I wasn't born here. I'm not. My wife is a Newarker. I was born and raised in Patterson, which is not much different, just smaller than Newark is. But much like Noel, I wanted to go through the city and reclaim those spaces that had been claimed by others. So I felt that Symphony Hall, was called the Mosque Theater. That was a clear take from the Islamic faith. And I said, well, if they're going to call it the Mosque Theater, I want to reclaim that as a space, safe space for the recitation of the Quran. So 8 years ago, that's how I came about the idea of the Quran competition for children, mirroring what goes on around the world, in Africa specifically, that Newark would be that space, specifically Symphony Hall or the Mosque Theater, that I can, regardless of ethnicity, that Newark can be that central place where young Muslims can come and they can recite the Quran and be rewarded for it, because that is something that of all the faiths that we take pride in, is that we have young people and old people who have memorized the book from beginning to end, all 112 chapters of it, and on any moment's notice that they can recite it. So it's encouraging, and I realized that the children who do put forward the effort to memorize it excel. They excel in secular academics as well as secular studies. So if I could just get those children and their parents to buy into that, that is a successful way to engage, not only for religion, but socially. you know, to be able to connect to people and have the love of another language and the ability to recite beautiful prose from a beautiful work. So, you know, that was my way of buying, you know, investing in the community. And through it, I realized that there's a lot that could be done. You know, we can help so many families as a result of it. So, you know, that's the engagement, that's my buy-in. And so far it's been successful.
For me, you know, community connections are vital to the survival of the Newark LGBTQ Center. It is now in its 9th year of operation. It has always been an organization that heavily relied on volunteers in order to run and operate. And Kareem, I'm sure you can relate and comment to that, since you were there during Reverend Janice Jackson's being executive director and part of the founding board members. And so for me, you know, one of my struggles is to keep the doors open, keep safe space for the LGBT community, especially the community of color, while the resources are drying up all around us and we are losing, you know, aspects of our community that we used to have in Newark. And as Bashir was saying about reclaiming space, you know, one thing that I, you know, would love to see is a thriving neighborhood in New York, in Newark, which we used to have more so like along the Halsey Street strip, which is on the border of the college, right? That's Rutgers was our neighbor. But that, you know, the development and, you know, I will use the, probably the dirty word gentrification that is occurring in that particular area. It means that we got moved out of our typical historical presence in that neighborhood. And so now we're in the Newark Public Library. We are in the Newark Public Library because of connections, right? Because of going out to other organizations, including Rutgers, and having a discussion about, you know, where the center would land if, you know, once we got moved out of Halsey Street. The 11 Halsey Street was the original location. And because of development going all around, you know, the developer did give us time to move. But, you know, we really depend heavily on networking and community connections. I, you know, and I'm sure people in SPA will tell you that I never let go of my school. And I used to be there on a regular basis, pre-COVID, of course. I worked with Gary at the Cultural Diversity Center. I've worked with Mel McCune prior to that. We work with Guard State Equality. The Newark LGBTQ Center is a center for everyone. We work with everyone. We work with anyone, right? Regardless of color, race, class. As long as you are part of this community, we are here. We are here for you. You know, the work with the Newark Police was all about reaching out and outreach and engaging the police department. And in order to work with the Newark Police Division, the same thing goes for the work we do with public schools. So for me, having community connections is absolutely vital to the survival of the Newark Community Center, and vital to making sure that safe spaces continue to exist in the city of Newark, because they're not abundant like they used to be, not socially and not in terms of public institutions. And so it's important for me to sustain that presence, no matter the challenges of, you know, lack of funding and, you know, and not being able to employ permanent staff. So we rely heavily on volunteers, and you can't have volunteers without connections to community, connections to institutions, connections to the church community, to the faith community, to student groups, to family groups. You know, come one and come all. You know, we need board members and we need people to volunteer in the center. So for me, you know, one of the things that I do a lot of is that networking and connecting and finding what resources are available to the center from the institutions that surround, you know, our location, which in Rutgers is one of those institutions.
And I'll just add it really quickly. I think for me, as I grow and I develop both personally and professionally is just understanding that, you know, the cliches that we hear, no man is an island, or, you know, the idea of silos not working and so on. I think what really made it real for me, we had Stacy and Chin visit Rutgers University for a reading of her book, her anthology of poems. And in one of them, she talked about, you know, all oppression being interconnected, and just kind of understanding how real that is, and how true that is, right? I currently work in the arts. I work for Yendor, which was founded by Rodney Gilbert, and understanding how public art plays a role in having conversations around, you know, people experiencing homelessness, or you know, formerly incarcerated individuals, or just activism and advocacy and so on, and just realizing that, you know, we don't necessarily address that in our work, but there are other organizations who do, and we can always pull them to the table and have those conversations. And so, and that's how we fund a lot of what we do, right, through partnerships and so on. So it's very instrumental to, at least for me, to have those, for those reasons, to foster and facilitate those conversations and those partnerships and those and working those networks and cultivating them, because that is how we've been able to experience kind of like true change, or change that is significant enough to remain. And there's still more to do, but significant enough where we could say, yes, we achieved this one thing.
I mean, I hear a lot of family, community, and of course service, right? And the things that you're tying together. And I think, you know, what's great about what each of you does is that it really, it does sort of reflect back the, you know, one of the mantras of Rutgers University Newark, which is, you know, thinking about being of the city, and being kind of a partner in the city, and of course embodying the core philosophies of our mission statement. And so I wonder if, you know, if any of you want to speak to other things that are important parts for you of embodying mission. Are there things that you know, are sort of keeping at the forefront of your mind as you work to continue advocating for communities, or really just, you know, to sort of in a very holistic way to continue anchoring them? Clearly service is one of them, but are there other things that you would add?
You know, that's a deep question, because when you look at you know, where we are in this moment, and then you think about past moments, and you say, well, how successful were we when these moments are continuing, and it's the same wall that we're running up against. It's the same dynamics, the same challenges that you know, cause people to stumble. It's the same oppressions, and so I don't know of any other way but to handle and to jump in and handle this is but by serving others. Because you know, we live in a society now where it's all about the I. Now I'm not saying this panel, because this panel is definitely unique in the sense that we work together. There's no I in this. Like, you know, we're talking about the collective. So if one hurts, we all hurt. If one doesn't eat, we all don't eat. What's good enough for one is enough for two. Enough for two is enough for four, and so on and so forth. You know, my neighbor needs to be safe, so therefore I need to make sure that the neighbor beyond that is safe. So the only way you accomplish any type of success in what we're doing, in any type of advocacy, or, you know, dealing with how our work intersects, is you can only accomplish this by being a service-minded person. I mean, you know, we didn't jump into academia because we wanted to, you know, make $1 million and get rich. You know, we know that that's not it. We're here because we know we either want to teach, advocate. We want to make sure that knowledge is shared and people benefit from this knowledge. So, you know, I have to think about, you know, my mom was a service-minded person. You know, she was involved in politics when I was a young child. She was also, you know, cub mom and all this stuff. So, you know, and I watched how she interacted and how she was always thinking about, you know, service. And same thing with my father and the neighborhood kids. You know, it was always about service and making their lives better by being of service, putting them all into his car and taking, not only did we go swimming, but everybody went swimming. So this is just the way I know success works, is that it takes a collective, a minded, you know, people who want good for everyone, no matter what it is that they're doing, that we believe in what we're doing. And we know that the passion that we have is what gives us, you know, what we understand to be success in these endeavors. But that comes with a lot of failure. That comes with a lot of misses. That comes with, you know, not being able to get that one person that help that he or she needs, and, you know, or having that one person that you would like to have helped, and only finding out that he or she succumbed to a drug habit. And you have to, you know, in my case, we have to pray janaza over them, or I have to send some, you know, commissary to the person who's incarcerated because of his or her decisions. But there's always that hope that one day this work won't be necessary. At least that's how I feel about it. At least the aspect of work that I'm doing, you know, that it won't be necessary. But as long as it is, you know, this is my job. This is my job. You know, my phone. You know, someone asked me the other day, well, Bashir, why do you put your phone on social media? I said, because I'm a social servant. I'm a public servant. Why wouldn't I have my phone? Like, I have nothing to hide. Like, I don't have $1 million. Like, what are you gonna come and rob me? I mean, so like, I'm here to serve. So you're gonna take from me, you're taking from yourself. So, you know, that's how I feel. That's where we are with this. That's what gives us, at least I feel, and it's, you know, the sessions that we got together and talk, like, this is what drives us, and we're passionate about it. And you know, we feel that these are missions. These are missions that we were called to. You know.
For me, one of the things I really am focused on, especially right now, is the idea of you know, economic justice and what's happening in the city. You see these wonderful developments going on everywhere, and all of this money is being thrown into particular areas of Newark, and then there are other particular areas that are completely ignored. There are agencies and organizations who are super well funded, and then there's other agencies that are on, you know, working on shoestring budgets. How do we do something about that? You have some of the largest philanthropic organizations and companies based right here in this city with deep pockets and lots of money and lots of expertise, but how is that reaching your grassroots organizations, especially those organizations that are led by people of color, and especially those organizations that are led by women? There is a disparity between how those organizations are resourced as opposed to how organizations are resourced that are run by white men, white women, people in a particular economic class who may have come from a particular academic world. And so, you know, are afforded opportunities that other people are not. And so for me, you know, Rutgers is an organization that is full of expertise, resources, influence, and those need to be brought to the assistance of you know, the nonprofit sector, you know, seeing all of those great young minds engaged in the community, you know, volunteering, being on the boards of organizations, coming up with innovative projects to do fundraising, you know, the creative arts and all of that. It's important that we keep focused on that, because especially in this economic times we're in right now, inflation and all of that, and, you know, everybody's resources are shrinking with COVID. I mean, we've been through a lot, right? As a city, as a country, as a world in the last couple of years. And so when things like that, those major shifts come along, oftentimes you will lose resources that you will never gain back because you're simply not, you know, the flavor of the day, or you're not, you know, you're not the attention grabber of the day. And so, you know, but these anchor organizations, these grassroots anchors organizations, are really critical to the survival of marginalized people in this city. And so, you know, I would like to see more of that, more shared resources in terms of money, expertise, space, and availability, so we can strengthen our organizations that are run especially by people of color and women.
Really quickly, one of the things that came up for me, and that's been a constant for me, especially over the last maybe 2, 3 years, that I was trying to figure out what am I going to do with this doctoral degree? Like, where do I want to take it? How do I want to shape my voice? Yeah, what do I want my voice to be in research? Um, and it's something that my faith also teaches me, is the fact that, and it's something that's echoed in, Beatrice's and Bashir's response, the idea of being a vessel. And I like that because in times when I'm feeling flustered and frustrated, I'm humbled and humbly reminded that what I'm doing, what I'm engaging in, yes, I'm impacted by it, but I've also been given a certain access that other members of my community have not been given. And so I'm simply a vessel, right, to create access for them. And I think a part of that is also modeled in kind of like the anchor institution model that Rutgers Newark is embodying. And I'm not saying that they're perfect at it, but I think that, they've really been living into it, the idea of being a vessel, right? We've been fortunate. We have some history has allowed us to get some type of resource that our surrounding community or members in our surrounding communities does not have. And so we try to be a vessel in that sense. And I think that's something that has been a constant for me, especially over the last 2 to 3 years. Like I said, I try to like shape and figure out what my advocacy is going to be and how I want to show up in academia and in practice, and how I want to represent the communities that I come from.
Noel, I don't know if you wanted to add anything, but I was going to say, I think this is a really nice place to now pivot a little bit more and ask if you all would maybe share one or more of the tough lessons that you've learned in the work that you do. Because and this is probably a selfish question, right? But I often think about how much we hyper focus on the finished product, right? So, we see what your years of work, and it's always years of work, right, has produced. And then we applaud you, right? And we say, oh, this is fantastic. And then we're not really thinking about the continued years of work you're going to keep putting in to keep that excellence going. But I know from my own experiences that you learn a lot of tough lessons in those years and that time that it takes for you to make the things that you're hoping for look the way that or even start to look the way that you hope it will look, or the way that you envision. And so does anyone want to share, one of those? Are there tough lessons that have taught you some really good things that you continue to use to excel the progress, the initiatives, the programs that you do?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll make a quick comment. I mean, I recently went through that. Folks may not know, but a couple of weeks ago, the National Park Service granted the Frederick Douglass Field, Plain Street Colored Church that's here. We were granted one of the first national Underground Railroad site designations in North Jersey for the Underground Railroad federal program. So meaning that we're one of the few in the country, but one of the first, along with Patterson, to have our site recognized as a verified Underground Railroad site, which, as you all know, is very hard to prove that you're connected with the Underground Railroad. And we're really excited about it, because this site shows a lot of the activism and fundraising work that's evident at sites like the African Church in Boston and another church in Maine. So it's good to see in Newark that there was the center. But the first time I applied, it was a horrible, horrible experience, and we were rejected. And so I had to apply again. And it was a 60-page application. Spent a lot of time, up late before the deadline. But, and then there have been other organizations who were rejected 5 or 6 times. So I knew this year when we applied, we could have been rejected again. All this to say, recently we were presented with the opportunity, me and some other scholars, Dr. James Amamasor and Dr. Linda Epps, to do the historical narrative for the Harriet Tubman sculpture in Washington Park. And due to the fact that I had to work on this second application, really like refining the ideas, the historical narrative, who were the players in the Underground Railroad here in Newark. And actually my work is actually now about like this whole region. So the Mid-Atlantic corridor and looking at the Black abolitionists there. But due to that horrible all those horrible evenings and stress and really doubting myself, my own scholarship, we're able to provide stronger work for the public about, Black power and Black abolitionist work. Did I know this when I was rejected last year? No, no. I was just like, I don't want to do this again. Mommy, save me. But actually it's my mother who got me into activism and being into history, rest in peace. So, I think there's lots of times where the work that we're doing, I mean, whether we're in meetings, whether we're trying to, recruit more folks. When I worked with Newark Gay Pride, when Paris was the director, getting out on the street, trying to recruit folks and get their interest in Newark Gay Pride, try to tell them about, like, we have churches downtown that service LGBT folks. All of that is hard and it's emotional, deeply emotional, but I think we do it because it's rewarding, because it makes us all feel more present in this world and more invested in this moment, so I think that's what we get for long meetings, long archives, difficult conversations, relationships, professional, collegial relationships, so. Definitely, but it's this opportunity for people to be, including ourselves, more present in this life. That's what it's all about.
Well, for me, as Professor Lisi mentioned earlier, I spent a good part of last year out on the street fighting for a 40-year-old home. So, when you're trying to, or when you're educating people about the power of capitalism, it's usually the most oppressed that will take up capitalism as they think it's an ally. They'll talk about capital as if they have a lot of it, and yet they're advocating for the most of the oppressors. And in the city of Newark, as my dear Beatrice mentioned earlier, about it's a city of have and have-nots. And it's a tale of two cities, and that's very clear, very, very clear. And some of it can be said that it's, the worker, working class people aren't aware of how to play the game. Well, it's a game that's stacked, and that stacked game is not designed for working class to win, especially working class poor, which I believe we all will fit into working class, and on some level, lacking many of the resources that the wealthy have in the city. So being out there on the street in the cold and advocating for a home that was ours for 40 years, and to only have that home taken from us, and realizing that you have to find ways to be effective when you don't have the capital resources to get the major players to take you serious, to take you seriously, to let them know that, I'm going to clamp onto this. We're going to clamp onto this with our teeth, and we're not going to let go until we get something out of it. So what lesson that I've learned is in as a group, as friends of Branford Place, we learned was that that we have to think of ourselves as, David. We have to think of ourselves as the Davids. We're going to hit you in the eye with something. We're not going to let you go. We're going to agitate, and we're not going to make it easy for you to take our home and walk away with nothing. So, and in doing so, you have to know when it's time to say, okay, what can I do so that not only am I comfortable being out in the street, but I have people who aren't comfortable being out in the street. So the need to compromise, the need to learn how to compromise. I'm an extremist. Anybody tell you know me all my life, I'm all or nothing. I'm straight ahead, and I wear it on my sleeve. So that means I'm very passionate. And in my decades on this earth, I'm learning as a mature person how to compromise. So the lesson that I've learned was through not being successful and not being able to save our home and our ownership of a 40-year-old building, 11 stories in the city of Newark. That is, it's a capitalist dream, for people who don't have anything. This was our home. It was our piece of this block. So we walked away with it with 2,000 square feet of what was once our home. So we were able to get the developers to acquiesce to granting us 2,000 square feet of sacred space of what was once 11 stories of our home. So we quite didn't save the building, but we were able to move them to grant us 2,000 square feet of sacred space to remain on that corner of the city. So hard lesson. It's a hard lesson, and you have to, get much of the working class to realize, just how insidious capitalism is, just how insidious gentrification is. When you walking down the street and you don't feel comfortable in your own neighborhoods anymore. I think that's what it's going to take. Beatrice, is to realize, well, we once had Halsey, now we don't. It's no longer, we can't identify with it. It's overpriced. We can't afford to live there. We can't afford to play there. So, we need to understand the power of capitalism. That was the lesson that I learned this past year and going on 2 years of this fight.
Okay, so we are at 6:30, but I will ask any one of you, what's one encouragement, one note of advice you would give to someone who wants to get into the kind of work that you do, community building, anchoring spaces, neighborhoods, families, people in the city of Newark? And then I'm going to turn it over to Alexandra. So anyone, one note of encouragement, what would you say to folks?
Hang in there. This kind of work is frustrating and it has its own sense of time, right? You want social change to happen in the immediate. You always do, especially if you're the marginalized group of people who have been historically marginalized for years and years and years and years and years, right? You want change, you want to change, you want to, now it's like, Nina Simone says in Mississippi Goddamn, the song, the progress is too slow. You want us to just stay in this space and stay over here and it's not your turn. And so you will experience incredible amounts of frustration. And so how do you deal with that frustration? Because some things, measures of success are short term, and then some things are the long game, right? And time is very relative and is very different in this community work. If you can get something accomplished in 2 years, don't think you haven't done something great. Just think that, hey, it took 2 years, but we accomplished it. A lot of times we measure ourselves against wanting to get stuff, and I am guilty of that. I get incredibly frustrated at the slow pace of change, especially in durable government processes and systems like police departments and city hall and philanthropy and so, but you keep going at it. I really rely on my faith, as Bashir mentioned, and you're talking about LGBT friendly worship spaces. I'm a member of one of those spaces. And so I rely very heavily on that to give me hope, to keep plugging in at this work, be satisfied and pat yourself on the back for small accomplishments as well as big accomplishments, because sometimes it's those little steps that you're taking that are going to lead to the big change. You know, how do you go from protesting to planning to progress to perpetuating social change? That does not take place overnight sometimes, depending on the circumstance. But you know, you have to be able to hang in there and persevere and be resilient and do things that will encourage your resilience. Surround yourself with like-minded people, have a good network of folks to support your work and even just to support you personally, because this is a very personal thing that we do. And it can take its toll on you emotionally sometimes, especially when you can't understand why people don't get it. And how many times do we have to say it? How many times do we have to repeat it? How many times does a trans person have to die in the street? You know, how many times, how many more headlines are we going to see like that, where there's this disregard for people who are trans, that now you have laws, you know, starting in this country to try to erase that trans people as if they don't exist, questioning decisions that parents are making about the health and wellness of their children and their mental and emotional and spiritual health, you know, government reaching into places where it does not belong. And so having faced all this, you must have hope and you must have perseverance and resilience, and measure your success not in traditional time, because this kind of work sometimes can take years. And but the thing is to keep at it, because you can make a difference. You can make a difference.
Thank you so much for that, Beatrice. I really appreciate that. Okay, I don't want to stop talking to y'all. Kareem, did you want to say something?
I was just going to quickly add, don't forget to anchor yourself. That's all. Just anchor yourself. This work is hard. It gets thankless. It gets difficult. And I think, and I wasn't going to say it because Beatrice kind of touched on it towards the end and kind of like talking about taking care of yourself and make sure you have a network and really take care of yourself. Anchor yourself first, because you know, this work can burn you out and it can deplete you. And because if you're passionate and like Beatrice said, if you're from the communities that you're trying to help, you get extremely like riled up and so on. And that's good. You need that fire. You need that kind of radicalism. You need that kind of push, but don't forget to anchor yourself.
And I would just quickly add, I think it's important to make things easier for other people. So if you have the opportunity to do something that makes things more transparent, like a process, a decision, or whatever, easier for someone that's within your capacity and makes sense, as Kareem said, I think it's important to do that, because there were a lot of people who made things more transparent. So because a lot of things that go on in this world, Bashir was talking about capitalism, but are meant to kind of make things so that they're not clear. That's really like a function of capitalism. And I mean, and you know, you want to help to make things clearer for people and also give people platforms and opportunities, so that they too can continue to grow and pass it on. So I think that's essential.
Okay, I know we're over time, but sure, you want to add anything? I'm sorry, Alexandra.
I just want to add that, you know, we all talked about networking, and I wanted, and I would be really, it would be unjust if I did not note that on this protest to save our space, we had the help from one of the most important institutions in this city, the Black Church. The Black Church was out there with us every weekend fighting for us, because they knew if they took it from us, they would take it from them. So what they were they're allying with us, let us know that they understood the assignment, and they knew that those pastors that were out there with us and members of the LGBTQ community that came out and supported us for this fight, they stood out there with us in the cold. They walked around the block with placards. They were out there fighting with us, and it would be unfair for me to say that, you know, they aided in getting what we did get. They did show that this was an investment in the community just beyond, not just the Muslims, but in the historic African-American spiritual and religious community in the city of Newark. And along with the mayor, the mayor's office understood, how important it was, and through his weight in this as well. So, I have to say that we were aided. We had allies in the city. So, and it only comes from what we were doing, what we're talking about, networking, finding those ways in the city that can help you and utilizing them when they can.
I love it. You all are so beautiful. I don't want to end this conversation, but I know we are over time. I'm sorry, Alexandra, but I am turning over the floor to you.
Wow, this was such a dynamic and inspiring conversation. This was absolutely wonderful. So Bashir, Kareem, Noel, Beatrice, and Dr. Hunter, on behalf of the Rutgers University Alumni Association, we thank you for sharing your time, wisdom, and expertise this evening. And we'd like to also thank the attendees for joining us today as well. So we hope to see you soon. Take care and be well.